Dear friends, dear colleagues, my name is Evaldas Kozlauskas. I'm a professor of clinical psychology at Vilnius University, Lithuania, and current president of the European Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, ESTSS. ESTSS, among our other responses in supporting Ukraine, is launching a series of webinars to bring together the professional community and present various perspectives of addressing the psychosocial and mental health needs that emerge as a result of Russian invasion in Ukraine. In this first webinar in the ESTSS series, we will talk about the ongoing reality of war and the impact of war on communities, map out potential mental health responses at the acute stage, as well as how to prepare for long-term support for war-affected populations. We have a panel of experienced experts for this ESTSS webinar, and I kindly ask my colleagues to join in and show themselves, and I want to introduce you. So we have Natalia Nalivaiko.
Yes, I can't for some reason can't make it.
Natalia, we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining and being here with us. Natalia Nalivaiko is from Ukraine. She's representing Ukrainian Society of Overcoming the Consequences of Traumatic Events.
Okay.
She's a board member of European Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, ESTSS, and it's nice to see you, and thank you for finding time to join with us, and we are looking forward for your presentation. The next speaker is Jana Javakashvili from Georgia. She's a professor of psychology from Elias State University. She's past president of European Society for Traumatic Stress Studies and has a lot of experience in working with refugees and various traumatized populations.
Good afternoon.
And we also have with us today Lela Tsiskarishvili from Georgia. She's a president of International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims, RCT, and board member of European Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. So I'm really looking forward to your insights and your perspectives. And I would like to start with my own introductory remarks for this webinar before inviting our panelists to talk. The ESTSS has a clear position and condemns the Russian invasion and war in Ukraine. ESTSS stands with Ukraine, and we're doing all we can to support Ukraine and war-affected populations, and also support mental health professionals who are dedicated to providing psychosocial support to those in need across Europe now. This war affected our society and all our members at the ESTSS, as well as the whole world. We have our friends, colleagues who are members of ESTSS in Ukraine, and we worry a lot about them. As ESTSS, as a society, we have to reevaluate our society's strengths, our priorities, reassess of what we can do and what we cannot do, how to help, but also how to take care of ourselves to be able to help at this terrible time of this war in Europe. For almost 30 years, ESTSS accumulated a vast knowledge on the effects of trauma, on psychosocial support and resilience. ESTSS' main strength is a large network of professionals and experts in psychotrauma. ESTSS is serving as a platform for communication among countries in sharing resources and expert knowledge in psychotraumatology at this difficult time. Immediately after Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, we launched a task force to coordinate our activities to support Ukraine. And at the ESTSS, we are already doing a lot by linking professionals, sharing resources, helping local communities, Special issue was launched in the ESTSS official scientific journal, European Journal of Psychotraumatology, to have a collection of evidence-based knowledge relevant to psychosocial care during ongoing armed conflicts. I invite you all to check ESTSS website for resources on psychosocial support and assessment tools in the Support Ukraine section, which is constantly updated. This first ESTSS for Ukraine webinar is the start of the series. We will have more webinars, also providing more practical knowledge for professionals working with war-affected population. And these recordings of these webinars will be freely available after these webinars. We'll have a series of presentations, and follow these presentations. You are welcome, to have a discussion with us with this limited time of 60 minutes. Please use chat and Q&A to ask questions, and we will be able to take questions after all our speakers will deliver their talks. And now it is my pleasure to invite Natalia Nalivaiko from Ukraine to give her perspective from inside of the country. So thank you very much, Natalia, that you found time and managed to join us. Looking forward to your talk.
Thank you for inviting. It's a big pleasure. It's great to talk to you and to all people here and tell what is going on here. A little bit. Hello, dear friends, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you for your interest to the topic. I thank you for your solidarity, which you demonstrated coming to this event, attending our webinar. Yes, Ukraine is in fire, is in bloody war unleashed by Russia as a genocide against people of Ukraine. But it is not just the Russian-Ukrainian war. It is the war where Ukraine fights for Europe, for freedom of Europe. And this is the war of two worlds, the world of fear and violence, and the world of liberty and choice. This is the war for the future of civilization. 23 days of slaughter, I don't have another word for this, what is happening here, revealed to the world unprecedented level of cruelty from the side of aggressor, who since the beginning of the war on February 24th at 5 o'clock a.m., when we heard in Kyiv bombing, we woke up and we couldn't believe, we thought we are moving, till now has almost completely destroyed cities and infrastructure in some regions of the country. Thousands of adults and almost 100 children have been killed, and many more have been injured. Residential buildings, private houses, infrastructure facilities, historical, cultural, religious buildings, including national heritage protected by UNESCO, were destroyed or severely damaged. More than 2 million people left the country as refugees, as you know. And a lot of people left the place they were lived to the west of the country. So the number of people who are moving here is much more higher. I'm personally also moved from Kyiv to more secure place, and I'm speaking to you not from the capital, from secure place where we can work and live and sleep. This is very small part of what is going on here. I cannot spend it. I will not spend a lot of your time, and moreover, you see, all of you watch TVs or you look through internet and see all these outrageous pictures every day and every hour, which is happening here. But despite of this, Ukraine showed the whole world their ability to for unprecedented heroism and consolidation of the nation in our strive for victory. And this war is known as the act of inhumanity. One lack of words to describe the pain, grief, despair, hate, which are overwhelming all people. Having said that, I want now briefly tell you what we face here as a specialist, as professionals in the first stages of the war. We know there's 3 weeks has passed. And from the very beginning, the whole population has been affected. And the response to this, in order to support people psychologically, to support ourselves, in the first days of the war, immediately, the groups of psychologists, psychotherapists organized the communities, or there was new communities, or old communities were established in order to provide support, to give people help. And one of these organizations which were immediately re-established, I mean, it was alive, was our prominent organization, prominent formation, Psychological Crisis Service, which was formed in the end of 2013 on Maidan and the first Russian war. Now, again, surely people at the beginning were just running and scaring, and then they started to come to us with queries, questions, complaints, and to have our long way protected. I mean, in our long way, which we're going to cure people, to help them, we need to know what we are facing now to develop treatment, to develop cure, or just to know what to do. So the big words which population, I will divide it very shortly on two parts. What population feels and what population says, I mean also population, but what we have in our online offices, or even in offline offices, not offices, but places where refugees come to groups. And then I will tell you about our psychotherapeutic world, a couple of words. The first word, a first feeling which people bring to us is fear. Yeah, I don't say about hate and anger. It's overwhelmed. It's everywhere, because you couldn't expect it. First, the absurdity of it. People don't understand what has happened, how it could happen. Then behind of this loss, there is loss of belief, of home, of life, of people, of earnings. At the end of the day, at the end of these losses, it's always loss of sense. Yesterday we had big group, which also demonstrated the loss of sense. People don't understand how the car with elderly people and children can be killed, can be shot. Next feeling, the next symptom, I would say, or query is helplessness. People can't do anything. They can't influence. They don't know what will be next. And they can't control any life. They don't have like future. And of course, guilt. Guilt is everywhere. Guilt why I ran from the house, why I didn't stay. Guilt when I stayed, what it's dangerous, what children will do. Guilt when I stay, but I think I do not enough. When I left the country, I betrayed the country. When I left the children, I mean the parents, what the parents do. I could not influence them. The guilt, so for those who are moving, who lost houses, but they still have guilt. And the guilt for parents who don't want to go to shelter, one of the very often query here, often complain that parents, I mean elder people, don't want to go to bomb shelter, and children cannot take them. They just leave them home and they run. What they can do. Shame. On the problem of choice, should I go, should I stay? Either decisions would be wrong. Fear, of course, fear of bombing, fear of being killed, fear of children reaction, and would drive people to leave places and to run. These millions of people who run, it's a fear for children. And coming to this point, it's I want to, we recognized, we found out in one of the big, not big, average groups which we work with, a group of women, refugees, who lost houses in eastern part, and we have sessions here in West with them. We recognize the biggest fear, and it's very, very touching for us. It was to find out that they are fear of childbirth. Many pregnant women are in line for abortion. They don't want to give child a birth. They are scared. They don't know how they will protect them. Their husband either killed or went to army or just is going to join military forces, and the fear of continuation of the life is very scary to us. So that kind of to me is the most worrying symptom. And this is why even one of their colleagues even organized some appeal to the Western countries to help these women to be protected. Also, we are recognized as one of the severe symptoms is refusal to accept reality. I refuse. It's just a movie. I don't participate. Or also those who left in fear the country to accept reality of living abroad. They don't even unpack the bags because they know that very soon they will come home, and will ask them to start adopting. Of course, anxiety about somebody, not less about themselves, about somebody. Very many people now want demonstrate very, very extreme, very high activity, which is not always not enough. And other part, smaller, demonstrate apathy. Nothing, there is no resource, they're freezing, just you know this. Of course, I mentioned it at the beginning, hatred and anger. Yeah. And of course, fault of survivor, but it's very much familiar, but it's how hatred and anger, it's increasing with every bombing, with every killing. It becomes more and more, and it's really already very scary, because after the war we have to live in peace, and maybe if this hatred will not be in a way processed, it's dangerous. Yeah, but of course there is place for love. Love, because as I said at the beginning, the consolidation of the nation is such a high, have never ever been. And of course, all the war it affected all kinds of population, all types of population, and of course us, the psychotherapists, and we react in some way. And will be last part of my short talk, but I want to mention it that we had to change, restructure, reconsider, redo our activity, as the whole psychotherapy, I believe, has to do, starting from this war. The first, that we work for free. Those clients who can pay and won't pay, okay, but majority of people, they work for free, because they losing everything, they also lose money, the ability to pay. We volunteer as a civil psychologists, providing first psychological aid, or just to serve survival needs who can in a way. But we also work as a volunteer, the military psychologists, male and some female of us join military forces, and or we have some kind of territorial defense. So they work now as a military psychologists. Anyway, all of us involved, and all of us, we work either, I said, online, providing population engine basic needs, offline basic needs, survival needs, organizing remote psychological services for victims of war, of victims of who lose parents, for everything. We also, and what we demonstrate, as we say, we also have our groups, because it's very difficult to bear, you understand. We also have our groups of reflection, and what we feel as a psychotherapist, as psychologists, whatever, because we had to change modality. There are no now just psychoanalysts or gestalt or whatever. We all of us are just psychologists who support survival needs, or providing first aid, or making crisis psychology. What we share in groups, what we feel between ourselves, is Despite we try to attend whatever courses and trainings and seminars, webinars, if possible, and be in all places at the same time, we feel not enough. Like instead of doing that, I have to be there. The feeling of not completeness, yeah. And at the same time, exhausted. And in this time, at the same time, to split. So I mean that we are also very much fragmented, like our clients, but the groups help us to keep together. And what is very particular now is we always had a network, but the network which we have now is extremely strong and powerful. So we're able to organize immediate support, social groups, social media groups, telephone, whatever. The meetings make us able to cover great territories, even refugees outside of Ukraine, and support them in all means. One is particular thing about changes in psychotherapy, which is happening here, is rejection of neutrality. We, like it's even kind of manifesto, we don't now, we are not neutral. Even those who were always pretending to be neutral, we can't, yes. That because the psychotherapy now is not just listening, but act. And one more point which I want to stress is that there's a third thing which we do in societies, which is changing our relationship with foreign societies, with colleagues from other countries. And we've been expecting for a long time some changes, some input, some judgment, statement from Russian colleagues. We never received it. And all organizations of Ukraine now, we decided that we will have to have our position towards this, because they never condemned the war. They never said they are, some of them are rare people who said that they don't agree, but the majority there is have tolerant, they are silent, and we consider it as a support of the war. And we are formulating now our Ukrainian position towards do we at all want to, at any level, communicate with these societies. So all our efforts, all our life now, yes, it's driven by, not by thanatos, as we say, but libido, by life, despite of these big things, which severe things which happening. We are, all of us are, we believe in victory, and we are very much grateful to the whole society, the whole world, who support us in all means, by word, by soul, and by money. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia, very much for your touching talk and sharing emotions and how you feel there, and also showing this remarkable resilience and resistance, in fighting, and also your dedication as mental health professional in general, despite all these incredible difficulties trying to serve your communities. I'm sure we'll have more questions later on. So thank you, Natalia, very much. We'll return for final remarks and discussion at the end of this webinar. Now I want to invite Professor Jana Yavakashvili, past president of the ESTSS, to give her talk.
Thank you very much, Natalia, for your honest sharing and thoughtful sharing. Thank you, Valdas, for passing words to me. I would like to start my presentation with the art piece, introducing to you an art piece from 1917 by the famous Ukrainian artist Bogusz Shipych. The lady on this art piece is symbolizing Ukraine. She's holding a toddler and defending herself and the toddler from the double-headed eagle, which symbolizes Russia. And she is responding to aggression from the side of the eagle. She is saying, I would never take something which does not belong to me, but I would never give up anything which is mine. And this art piece actually 1 century ago reflects the threat of Russian invasion, which was followed then and which happened. And the history is repeating itself nowadays and today. And the world community, international community, all of us, we are again facing a challenge to be trapped in a victim, aggressor, bystanders triangle. Because we should not repeat mistakes which were done 1 century ago. And I hope that we will not, because this is time for choices, as Natalia mentioned. Yes, this is time for choices for each of us and for all of us as community of mental health professionals, and not only. And what is time of choices? That's asking set of questions to ourselves. So some questions are kind of universal. Where do we stand now? How to stop war? How to overcome own helplessness in front of the unfolding war? How to become more effective in our advocacy efforts, advocacy for Ukraine? And another set of questions which I dropped here, that's more professional, for more mental health community questions. How to help Ukrainian people in need with mental health problems, how to be evidence-informed in our attempts to help, and how to help during and not only aftermath the man-made disaster, because we all know very well that majority of our evidence is collected in the phase which follows the disasters, and all of our, almost majority of our guidelines concern aftermath disaster. Here I tried to respond to my own questions, and my responses are what we can do now to acknowledge and validate what is going on in Ukraine, and probably this webinar is also serving to this aim, to advocate for Ukraine, to attend to the pain of Ukrainian population, but also to acknowledge not only pain, but to acknowledge resilience. And we are witnessing huge resilience demonstrated by the Ukrainian people. And especially, I would like to focus my attention on my colleagues from the different parts of Ukraine. We know that Russia attacks from 3 sides, from east, from south, from north, and tries to promote in the country, but she does not succeed. And different colleagues of mine, and you see the pictures here, I just wanted to present this photo gallery to you and just to say a few words about them. That's Piotr Garmish from Dnipro. He's there and defends his town and helps people in need, and jokes that after being an expert in virology and immunology and epidemiology, he became geopolitical expert now. He's reflecting together with his clientele what is going on to overcome this confusion about which Natalia was speaking. Lena Badolyan, she went from Dnipro to Romania together with her 3 little children, and she works as a coordinator 24 hours, 7 days to provide supply, to coordinate provision of supply of food and medicine to her team, multidisciplinary services, Forpost and Sich, who work with people in need in Ukraine, in Dnipro. So this is Simeon Gluzman, head of the Ukrainian Psychiatrists Association. He's a former dissident. For 10 years, he served in the Russian concentration camp during the Soviet period because he was fighting political abuse of psychiatrists then. And he still is fighting against ongoing political abuse of psychiatry in Russia. And now he's staying in Kiev on the 15th floor of his apartment is the Kiev Center, and works on the issue of withdrawal of Russian Psychiatrists Association for the World Psychiatrists Association due to ethical violations. And this is Yulia Pievskaya, who is coordinating online psychosocial and psychological counseling for people in need. And this is Irina Pinchuk, psychiatrist, our colleague, who, being in Kiev, in the bomb shelter, initiated a hotline operational from the bomb shelter, which is called Don't Panic, and which is operational right now as well. This is Andrei Karachevsky, our colleague psychiatrist, who is defending Kiev now and training volunteers and records videos on how to provide psychological first aid for the volunteers. This is Tatiana Nazarenko. She also fled outside Ukraine together with her toddler, and she coordinates training direction. She tries to organize trainings in cooperation with the ESTSS for her colleagues. This is Vitaly Klimchuk. He's from Lviv, Ukraine Catholic University, and together with his colleagues, with Oleg Romanchuk and the great team, he's organizing mobile crisis intervention stations in the railway stations buildings, in the bus stations buildings, in the tents, to meet needs of the internally displaced people. And this is Volodymyr Bogoryly. Actually, Natalia did not mention his name, but this is the guy who is now advocating for pro-life choices among pregnant women. And being a person with special needs, he cannot walk properly. He moved to Ivano-Frankivsk, and he's working there as a volunteer and trains enormous amount of volunteers, up to 300 trained so far. He's delivering burnout prevention sessions for his colleagues. He's working with his clientele, but also he's working on the project for rehabilitation of children after war. So he's currently working on this project because he's hoping for better future as well as his colleagues. So this hope for better future in these conditions, which Natalia described, it very much reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who, being in the concentration camp back in the during the Second World War, was thinking about and proceeding in his mind theory of meaning of life. Natalia was speaking about loss of meaning, as a theory of meaning of life, and he was fantasizing to be in the circle of his colleagues from academia after war and presenting his theory, and that's what happened actually. Yeah, and this is a team of another team of volunteers, psychologists from different parts of Ukraine who are working for Samopomich crisis counseling, online counseling services as volunteers. And we have actually on Samopomich, which is organized by the Federation Global Initiative on Psychiatry for 2 years. Initially, it was helping Belarusian colleagues who were Belarusian people who were oppressed by the regime of Lukashenko. Now they switched and work for Ukrainian people. So that's geography of resilience, and I can speak of much more colleagues, many, but of course I would like to focus my presentation now on what can be done and how can we help. And we all know that we are so fond of pyramids in our responses to different disasters. And here I also implied this pyramid model as well to orient ourselves what can be done. So actually, if we are speaking about direct service provisions, that's the top of the pyramid. If we are speaking about training and supervision, a lot of processes are going on now. Evalda spoke about ESTSS plans regarding training. Yesterday, I attended very interesting and productive meeting by NATO network of military psychologists and psychiatrists, facilitated by Eric Vermeten and Irina Frankova from Ukraine. We are creating information resources, and starting from ESTSS, as Evaldas described, ISTSS, global collaboration on traumatic stress, international trauma consortium. So a lot of resources, and WHO resources, of course, a lot of resources are accumulated already now, but it's ongoing process. But I would like especially focus my attention on the very basic level of the pyramid. Let's not forget that we are in the middle of the war, and financial support is very welcome. Actually, those of you, I'm sure many of you in our audience are already helping organizations, individuals who are in need of financial support. But those of you who don't know any organization or individuals who need help in Ukraine, please contact our community of mental health professionals. We have a lot of contacts, and many organizations are in need of financial support. So that's one of takeaway messages I would like from my presentation. And now I would like to switch in my presentation towards more long-term efforts. Actually, I will speak based on my experience of dealing with the post-war situation in Georgia, when a lot of challenges, we were facing a lot of challenges, but I would like to focus your attention on some key challenges, which actually should not happen, these mistakes, but they usually take place when disaster happens. Somehow we are forgetting about things then. So help is often driven by own capacity of the helper organizations or individuals rather than needs. Another challenge is that sometimes, I regret to speak about it, but help is driven by opportunities, and let us be aware of such phenomena as is disaster tourism. Help often ignores resources of the local community. And especially now we are gathering as a mental health community, and I would urge you to not to lose resources of Ukrainian mental health community. Even in the among 2 million of refugees who went for survival to another country, there are a lot of excellent psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health professionals, social workers. Let's rely on their expertise. And help is not always trauma-informed. So how to respond to these challenges? That's not about rocket science and not about something we don't know, but every time disasters happen, we need to keep it in mind like mantra that nothing to do for target group without target group's involvement. We need to be in a constant dialogue, communication, cooperation with Ukrainian mental health professionals and employ them. And last but not least, and I would like to draw our attention as psychotrauma community and traumatic stress communities, that those countries which are receiving nowadays refugees in Europe from Ukraine, not in all countries we have psychotrauma, traumatic stress societies, and very often responses from the side of the mental health professionals there who are very eager to support their newcomer refugees are not trauma informed. I already have some information from certain countries that mental health community tries to help refugees with what they know with psychotherapy, but we know that now at this stage, it is not time for psychotherapy provision. It's time for empathetic, pragmatic help. So let's think of helping, addressing training needs of mental health professionals in the countries which receive refugees. And I would like to finalize my presentation with this classical scheme of longitudinal phases of disaster, just to orient ourselves, just to show the scale of the road, of the journey which we are supposed to go together, or we would like to go together. This is not sprint, that's marathon, which we are starting now, because we are over here when event is still ongoing, and then Ukrainian society will face long-term period of revealing and realizing the damage and changes in function of the society. And the support should be, and relief work should be long-term, and work focused at recovery needs to be a long-term work. And we all know about honeymoon phase of the responding to disaster practices. And we all now are in kind of honeymoon phase when we are very eager to help and we are helping, but we know that disillusionment phase is next door. So let's try to be as much aware of this disillusionment phase as it's possible. Let's try to plan for long-term cooperation, long-term accompaniment of the Ukrainian community of mental health professionals. Let's plan in a way not to burn out and not to experience compassion fatigue, because that's marathons, that's not sprint, and we need to prepare for years of work, I think, and years of cooperation, and let's be proactive in this road. And I am sure that on this road Ukraine will win. Ukraine переможе. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Jana, for your thoughtful presentation. It was very nice to see that you showed the pictures of professionals who are working hard there and supporting their communities with remarkable initiatives, and despite all these terrible conditions. So thank you so much, and also framing this and inviting colleagues to think about long-term collaboration and support. It's very important now in this acute phase to support, but also, think how we can, think a little bit in a planning and think more strategic. So thank you, Jana, very much for your thoughts. And now I want to invite Lela Tsiskarishvili, President of International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims. Lela, we're really looking forward to your input to this webinar.
Thank you, Evaldas, and I'm very mindful of the time, and I'll make sure not to overstep the time. So I want to speak about the various dimensions of mass and extreme traumatization, and I want to focus on the importance of justice in the process of healing. And I'm also mindful that we have a very diverse audience. Some people are from overseas. So I want to somehow frame and conceptualize what Natalia has very emotionally conveyed to us, that there's one big stressor, which is the horrendous Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, the exposure and experiences are rather different for different cities, different communities, different groups of people. So there are refugees and there are in turn displaced people that Natalia already spoke about, who are mourning, have survival guilt, have left behind a lot of things. There are cities that are under permanent shelling and bombardment. And there's immediate threat of death, and the primary objective is survival. And often people do not survive in these cities. There are cities that are under siege without access to water, heating, electricity, and on top of that, they're being bombarded. There are cities that are awaiting siege, like Kiev and Odessa. So there's this stressor of anticipation and uncertainty of what is ahead and whether that what is yet to come. And there are cities that are under Russian occupation, and Russian forces are attempting to instill fear, terror. There are enforced disappearances in those cities. There are alleged rapes in those cities, torture, etc. So there's one big stressor. However, different individuals and communities are experiencing, and there are different stages of survival. And we need to be mindful that those who are probably in the worst conditions don't have yet any access to any kind of help because they still have not survived. I also want to emphasize that trauma is a singular and the collective experience, and I want to talk a little bit about the interplay of the two. And as a singular and the collective experience, the damage inflicted. This is a photo from the Georgian War. I personally witnessed when this photo was taken by a very good friend of mine, a photographer. So we see a damaged building here that was bombed. And this is basically a day after when we went there together with my friend. She was accompanying us. I'm also representing the Georgian Center for Treatment of Victims of Torture. So when we went after the bombing to see the community. This is a damaged building, and this is a woman who entered her house and everything is in rubble, and she's looking at the picture of her being a baby and her grandmother holding her. So the damage inflicted and experienced is unique to each individual, and the pathway to recovery. And sadly, we will also see that not always and not everyone recovers, and they, for long periods of time, people live with this immense trauma and suffering. So it's experienced individually. However, in the context of mass traumatization, this trauma and violent affects thousands and millions, and trauma is becoming a shared reality that is experienced in a myriad of ways by individuals, communities, and the society at large. This is a picture of the Mariupol Drama Theater, and why this is a harrowing picture for those of you who may not have seen it. This is a drama theater, and it says very clearly in Russian, children, from two sides of the theater. And it's visible from the sky that it says children. 2,000 women and children were sheltering in this building. Nevertheless, Russian forces bombed the theater. And yesterday I came across the text that describes that Mariupol is a witness and a monument of the genocide of the Ukrainian nation. So this is a collective shared trauma. And Mariupol is basically one of the main witnesses of this. And still, why this is so painful, we don't know whether or not Mariupol will survive. So healing is an intimate and a socio-political process at the same time. And we as mental health professionals, when we work with survivors of atrocities and mass human rights violations, we have to be very mindful and aware of that. I also want to emphasize the human rights side of it, and the war crimes and the genocide side of it. Because when we work with victims of grave human rights violations, we have to understand that justice is an inseparable part of healing. And as therapists, we may succeed with reduction of symptoms, I don't know, flashbacks or intrusive memories with our trauma-focused interventions. However, restoring integrity, dignity of an individual is only possible through holistic care. And justice is an inseparable part of that. In Georgia, when Russia invaded Georgia, we started taking, and we are main mental health professionals, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. We started taking testimonies of individuals who had been kidnapped, who had been held hostage, etc. When the International Criminal Court opened investigation into Georgia, we started taking testimonies of our clients, and they became witnesses in these court proceedings. So International Criminal Court already opened investigation into war crimes in Ukraine, and you see here the violations and the crimes they'll be looking into: rape, murder, imprisonment, enforced disappearance, etc., etc. So it is important for us to be mindful that justice is a part of healing, and there is no healing without justice. I'll skip some slides because I think it will be more interesting to open the floor for a discussion. And it's interesting that Jana also mentioned Viktor Frankl. I also reread Frankl last Sunday because, as Natalia said, that it's impossible to make sense of the horror that is happening. And I reread Viktor Frankl's Men in Search of Meaning over the last weekend, trying to make sense of the horror that is happening. So this quotation struck me: "Forces beyond our control can take away everything you possess except for one thing, your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation." So we are not all witnessing how Ukrainians and our also Ukrainian colleagues have chosen and are responding to the situation. And hopefully the international community also will provide support on a long-term basis, as Jana mentioned, and not just in the acute phase of crisis. And again, I stole this photo from Twitter. It was initially, this photo is taken in a bomb shelter, but this has apparently become a poster and is somewhere outside of Kiev. And it says everything will be fine. I definitely cannot assure anyone that anything will be okay. However, resilience and courage, often humor of the Ukrainian people, give us hope, and it's reassuring that there is some light at this very long and painful road, which is probably filled with mines. And from our side, while planning interventions, it is crucial to maintain the delicate balance and be mindful of the public and private dimensions of traumatization and healing, personal and social political aspects, as well as shifting, as Jana mentioned, as Natalia mentioned, between recognizing and attending to the pain, as well as fostering resilience and acknowledging the resilience. And also understanding that we see enormous collective resilience of the Ukrainian people. However, there is a lot of individual pain and suffering. So we should not over heroize what is happening, and we should be very, very aware of the terror and the suffering that is happening on the ground. Thank you very much. I skipped some of the slides because I realized that we are off time.
Thank you, Leila, very much for putting human rights perspective to our panel and outlining like the basic needs and the terrible situation that is going on. So even with all our, will to help, it's very, very difficult. Then the war is going on and people are dying, and especially these pictures there, we see that there's a bombing on the most vulnerable Ukrainians. That's really horrifying. So now we going to our final webinar part for the discussion. So if it's possible, I would like to invite Jana and Natalia, you join back. And if you can switch your cameras and mics. And I looked into the chat. Thank you very much all for joining us, for your comments, your support. So we have a really diverse audience. We have Ukrainian friends, we have people from around Europe and around the globe. So strong support, Natalia from Sweden, the UK, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Lithuania, Croatia, Norway, and professionals from other countries that joined here. And then looking into the questions, what I see, like this a balance of questions, how we can learn from previous wars that happened like in Georgia with Russia, and how we can use this knowledge to help. But mostly I think like the main question is how we can help now Ukraine, what are the current needs, and we as a mental health professionals, how we can help. So I think that also in the chat we see that there's like two directions. So there's also activity support Ukraine, but also refugees who are outside of Ukraine. So maybe Natalia, that will be like for the final round of comments, a question to you. What would you tell to listeners of this webinar, how we can support you?
First of all, thank you very much for attending and for such warm words. I read here a lot of, and here and from other resources. You already help us by support, by attending, by listening, by distribution knowledge, by distribution information, what is going on, because not necessarily everybody understands and wants to know. We have here very qualified psychologists, I can tell you, since 2013. But of course, you always need support. You need your recommendation. If you, anyway, we have resources. We have links. As Jana said, the very good financial support. We also appreciate any kind of. If you can send something to link Help Army, would be great. In terms to help us, I mean, you can contact ESTSS, and ESTSS may direct us to us with your knowledge, because I'm sure every country has its particular, very special kind of knowledge, which will be absolutely appreciated. Now we are the first stage, like survival needs, and then we'll go further, and we'll see. Maybe we are the first actually country in the Europe now who faces long war already for 3 weeks, and it's going to continue, unfortunately. So again, we're developing something which has never been developed yet here. And anything which will be very much appreciated. Send it to Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. I think that ESTSS can take a leading role, not to overwhelm you with multiple emails. So we sort of have very strategic communication. We have a task force that coordinates communication with the friends in Ukraine, because they are very busy in providing support. So sometimes we may wish to help, but it might be too much. So we need to be a little bit more coordinated. So that is what we are doing here. The ESTSS is trying to coordinate our actions to build up resources and then send them rather than constantly questioning, how can we help? Jana, maybe you can add something on what we can do now and respond to this talks and comments.
First of all, thank you very much to our colleagues for their comments and empathy and encouragement. I think that's the spirit which we need to cultivate and to bring further. And I think that we need to go on. And if we realize that that's a long journey, and we need to plan, to coordinate, and to dedicate our time and energy, then we will overcome, of course.
Thank you, Jana, so much. And Lela, maybe you can comment. And I see also in the question that maybe you can respond. What do you mean by there is no healing without justice?
Oh, that's a long discussion. But yeah. I'm talking about when it's when somebody has been wronged and when a society has been wronged. Justice is an integral part of healing. When you see perpetrators brought to justice, and there are different forms of justice, there are international tribunals, there's also symbolic justice. So this is a big topic which will not fit in the 2 minutes we have left. I didn't put intentionally testimonies of our clients with whom we accompanied in various international court proceedings who testified against Russia, being mindful this is an open webinar and I didn't want to jeopardize our clients. But I can assure you that it brings a huge relief when you see somebody who has wronged you brought to justice and held accountable for the horrendous acts that they have done. On a more practical note, Evaldas, because I'm reading in the chats, so many people want to help and contribute. Yeah. And what Jana was saying, that financial assistance right now is very important. For instance, our colleagues from the eastern parts of Ukraine, and Jana showed Lena's picture, for instance. There are colleagues in Kharkiv, there are colleagues in Nikopol, in Dnipro, who are now, they're not doing any psychological help, but they are doing primary medical assistance. They're delivering medication to our clients, to their clients. They are maybe helping them safely move from one place to another. So I am assuming there's a registration list for this webinar. And if we send out to that registration list several of our several organizations that work in the west of Ukraine, central, east, and they can choose where they can, to which organizations they can donate. I saw ICRC's name popping up here, which is wonderful. However, big international money goes slower to the grassroots. So if we send directly to organizations and colleagues that work directly with the people,
probably we can establish open list for such organizations. Yes. Which need help, and yeah, it could be open, and we can add yes. continuously the organizations, and then people can choose whom to help. Mm-hmm. So I also wanted to say about this, that Ukrainian people proved that they are very resilient. What we need now, just foster this resilience and support this resilience with all the possible means, like financial, academic, human support, humane support, so empathy and solidarity.
Yeah, so that is also very much in line with what we as ESTSS, as a community, think that, donating to charity is very important, because as we told, you need some finances for basic needs. And we as ESTSS, we are not a charity foundation as it is, but we can link with relevant organization because we have a lot of information about that. So we'll try to figure it out and put up the links also that mental health professionals, those who want to help, so they can, identify organization and try to have direct then contributions to their activities. So that's very important. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Lela. Thank you, Jana, for your really deep and touching contributions. And it's so important that we discuss this, and then coming on the professionals from around the globe. Even from Australia, we received support. So Natalia, you really can see that there is a lot of support, and we really stand with Ukraine and doing all we can. And I think that, well, on the personal note, I came into this field of psychotraumatology by doing research and studies and interviewing survivors of political oppression and political prisoners, and I had multiple talks. And one of the questions that I always had, what helped you to survive? And a lot of them told hope. So it's very much, in line that we talked today about Frankl, and so having a meaning or hope is very important. So Natalia, seeing your resilience, your dedication, it really gives us more hope. And I think that it gives also hope to all mental health professionals that even it's very, very difficult, we can do little, but also we can do something. And by doing all of us a little, we do a lot. So we will continue this webinar series, having even more practical information for professionals and linking professional communities. As is ESTSS, we have this option to cross borders, and then linking those who want to help with Ukrainian colleagues with this organization in Ukraine. Thank you all very much for joining us or revisiting the recording if you're viewing recording. Bye, and until next meetings.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Zoran, are you here?